Good morning. This is Ruth L. Snyder joining you from Bonnyville, Alberta, Canada. And this morning, I am going to talk a little bit about dealing with imposter syndrome. I am an author. I was able to participate in a book project in December that hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. I am also a book coach. I help entrepreneurs write, publish, and profit from their books. And I enjoy speaking as well. The Oxford Dictionary defines imposter syndrome as, quote, the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills, end of quote. And as you see in the quote, the fortune cookie on Fireside here, depending on the study, up to 80% of or 82% of people struggle with imposter syndrome. So I guess it's true that misery loves company. Even those who we see as successful often struggle inwardly with imposter syndrome. I struggle with it at times. And I remember I taught piano lessons for almost 30 years, and performance anxiety and imposter syndrome often go hand in hand. And I struggled with that as a music teacher, but I always made sure that I performed along with my students as an example to them that fear didn't need to hold you back. I remember how encouraging it was to find out that pianists, professional pianists who do concerts around the world, often will get sick before they have their performance. So I think imposter syndrome is something that is more common among creative people. I could be wrong. I don't have any facts to back that statement up, but many of us who are creatives struggle with imposter syndrome. And like I said, depending on the study, up to 82% of people in general struggle with it. When imposter syndrome strikes, we have a choice. And like I said, when I was a piano teacher, I pushed through that fear and I performed as an example to my students. Even this morning, getting on here and doing this show, I struggled with imposter syndrome. Does that need to hold us back? No. We can let fear cripple us, or we can look it in the face and do what we want to do anyway. It could be writing, it could be performing music, it could be any number of things. Let's be courageous today. Some things that I have found helpful in dealing with imposter syndrome are some questions. So, number one, the first question: who told you that you weren't good enough? And sometimes people do tell us that we're not good enough. Is it a person that knows the basics of what you're trying to do? Maybe it's somebody that you do need to listen to and you do need to improve your performance. But oftentimes, people who are scared to do something themselves are the first ones to criticize someone else. And maybe no one else is telling you that you're not good enough. Maybe you're just hearing those messages in your head. So maybe you just need to ignore those messages and move on and do what you want to do. The second question that I ask myself when I'm struggling is, how many times have I tried this? And I think of Thomas Edison, who is credited with developing the light bulb. There were others who also experimented but he's the one that found the formula that worked. And he tried over 1,000 different combinations before he was successful. I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like giving up and I give in to those feelings. I am working on being persistent. I generally am a little bit stubborn, and that helps me to be more persistent. But I am continuing to work on being consistent and not giving up. The third question I ask myself is, what is the worst thing that can happen? As creatives, we need to learn to fail forward. And we need to remember that failure is not permanent unless we don't try again. So think about what is the worst thing that can happen. People may leave you a 1-star review. Is that the end of the world? No, actually, most authors have 1-star reviews. People may not ask you back to speak. Is that the end of the world? No, because there's always other places that you can find people that want to hear your message. So remember, failure is not permanent unless you don't try again. And what are you going to do to try again? Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining. The fourth question I ask myself is, what will it feel like to hear about how what I'm doing is transforming lives? And I find that I don't often get that feedback, but when I do, that is enough to keep me going. It's incredible to hear those messages. And I think we need to share those messages of gratitude more often when somebody else is doing something. I am trying to do that. I am trying to review more books that I read and say thank you to more people. I just was challenged last week to write 5 handwritten letters to people that have influenced my life in a positive way. So I think anything that we can do that will encourage other people is great. And sometimes we need that motivation ourselves to keep going when things are tough. The fifth question I ask myself specifically about writing is, do I feel more comfortable speaking or writing? And I find with some of my clients, they are used to speaking more than writing, and that's the best way for them to get their book written. Hi, Angela. Thanks for joining. Good to see you this morning. So one thing that I do with my clients is I do some experiments with them to see what works best for writing. And then we use that to make sure that they can make their way forward and get their book written. Creativity, music, writing, they can all be lonely journeys, but it doesn't have to be. And my business partner and I are putting together a 30-day challenge where we are inviting people to share the journey with other writers and with us as coaches who have experienced what you may go through when you try to write a book. So if you're interested in more information, reach out to me and I will give you the details on that. I'm going to open up for Q&A. If you have anything that you'd like to ask, feel free to join the conversation and we will carry on talking about imposter syndrome. If not, I'm thankful that you joined the show this morning. And just to review what we talked about today, up to 82% of people struggle with imposter syndrome, so you're not alone if you struggle with it. When imposter syndrome strikes, we have a choice. We can let it cripple us, or we can look fear in the face and proceed anyway. And then there's 5 questions that I have found helpful when imposter syndrome raises its ugly head. Who told you you weren't good enough? How many times have you tried? What is the worst thing that can happen? What will it feel like to hear about how your work is transforming lives? And do you feel more comfortable speaking than writing, or whatever creative way that you are expressing yourself? Find what works for you. I am starting with short presentations here on Fireside. This is my second attempt, and I am going to do this every week on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern. So if you're interested in writing or creativity, feel free to join me. And I look forward to having conversations. If you have any questions about writing, you can ask those, and we will have discussions on different topics. Next week, we'll be talking about discouragement and how we can deal with that, which is closely related to imposter syndrome, but it could be a little bit different. So I see Chris is asking to come up. Welcome, Chris.
Well, good morning from San Francisco. How are you?
I'm well. I am in Alberta, Canada.
Oh, that's some goody. Uh, I'm so happy to hear you're in Canada. I have many friends in Canada, and I speak fluent Canadian. Anyway, my question is this. I'm not considered the writer in the family. My wife is
Uh-huh.
amazingly talented, amazingly gifted. How can I help her? I know this is kind of a related question, I hope, to writing process. How can I help her? Rather than just say, you're a great writer, you have the potential, you can do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's the best way, do you think, that somebody can encourage someone close to you to write, to use their talent?
I love that question. Thanks for asking it, Chris. I can only share what I would appreciate. Maybe the best way for you to find out what would be helpful for your wife is to ask her. But I think some things that would help me would be to have someone understand that I need space and distance sometimes when I'm writing. I was working on a novel one time, and I was frustrated when people would come and try to talk to me in the middle of that process, because I was in a different world and I felt like I was getting pulled between worlds. So just giving the space and time to write might be helpful. Encouraging words are always good as long as they're sincere. Maybe, I don't know where your wife is in the writing process, whether she has a book published already or not, but helping with events where she's going to speak about writing or speak about her books, being there to carry the heavy boxes of books if needed, those kind of things are always appreciated. I don't know if that's helpful for you, but those are a few suggestions.
So you're saying I have to talk to her?
Well, I hope you do talk to your wife.
And I have to carry heavy boxes? Wow, this sounds great. No, seriously, thank you. Also, as far as finding the space to write, I would tell her just go in the room and write. And she's like, you don't understand. I need, Calgon, take me away or whatever. So what I've encouraged her to do is go to community college we live across the street from in San Francisco and enroll in a course which is free
Mm-hmm.
and it will allow her to use the facilities. She can use the quiet study rooms, the quiet, I mean, quiet as a pin areas in the library where you can actually reserve a room. And so she's going to look into that. And then the final question is, how do I encourage her not to edit as she writes? Or is that my business to encourage? Because she constantly writes while editing. She's a great editor. And so she's always saying, that's not right. And she changes it. And I keep trying to tell her, encourage her to just write, get the first draft out, so to speak. Or is that my business to even meddle with?
You sound like a very supportive person. I I have mixed opinions about that because I tend to do the same thing, but I usually will write. I'll usually make myself write for 10 or 15 minutes, like get a few paragraphs out before I allow myself to go back and read it over and edit it as I go. I think we have to be careful about putting people in boxes. And yes, it's true. We need to get that first draft out. And the first draft is always ugly. I think if people are aware of those things, it's helpful. But I think we also need to give people space to be who they are. And if it works better for them to go and edit while they're writing, as long as they're getting the writing done, I wouldn't criticize too much. But I mean, the common wisdom is don't edit while you write. And I think that is because some people are so perfectionistic that they can't stand putting anything on paper or on the computer screen or wherever they're writing without it being perfect. And perfectionism is going to hold you back if you cannot go on without it being perfect. So if she is that type of person, then yes, you do need to encourage her, or I shouldn't say you need to encourage her. You could encourage her to write and not edit, but also be sensitive to the fact that that may be part of her creative process. So if it's working for her, if she's getting the writing done, then I wouldn't harp on it too much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've learned after 35 years of marriage that there's something called shut up. um, or in a politer word or words, the hush anointing, time to be quiet. Now, can I ask you another question? Is this too much?
No, go ahead.
People have told me for years, you should write a book. Now, that's like a catchphrase, I guess, but is it? I mean, I'm lazy. So, I'd much rather talk than write. But
Uh-huh.
I have been on Fireside. You mentioned this is your second broadcast, I think. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Um, Today I will be doing my 300 and I think 13th or something or 12th broadcast.
Well
So,
done.
my thank you. I was looking at doing 365 broadcasts on a certain topic, and so the idea of converting that into a kind of one-page devotional, 365 days in the year.
Yep.
So, are you the type of person I can schedule that call for? Tell us, how do we get in touch with you?
Yes, definitely. I'd love to chat more. My website is ruthlsnyder.com. And on there, you will find the opportunity to schedule appointments with me. I offer free 30-minute consultations. So I'd love to chat further with you. Some people do speak their books, and you can take a lot of your speaking and transform it into writing. There are wonderful AI apps now that will do some of that work for you. Of course, they're not perfect, and you need to go back and do a lot of work editing. Your wife could help you with that. But if speaking is something that comes more natural to you, use it and go with it. And I find that a lot of people who are more comfortable speaking, that's the best way for them to quote unquote write their book.
Well, thank you so much. I have really enjoyed Fireside for the past year or so. We can get our content and get our transcripts all sent to us, so that's kind of fun. So I guess that's all for now. Thank you for the show, the broadcast, and I see Jeannie's here. Or Jean's here. I sent out invite to all our followers to join your show here. So thanks again.
Thank you, Chris.
And as somebody once advised me and my wife concerning writing, the best thing to do is start writing. So thanks again.
Right. Just sit down and do it. There's a quote that says something along the lines of, I write when I'm inspired, and inspiration strikes every morning at 9 o'clock when I sit at my desk. So there's the inspiration part and there's the discipline part, and we need both of those.
Well, thanks again. And I'd love to see a book someday on the practice of Canadians drinking milk out of a bag. All right. Have a great
Oh, Chris. And by the way, Chris, I have written devotionals as well, so I would love to chat further with you. Any other questions before I close this down? As I mentioned before, I am going to be on every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. So if you are interested in writing at all, feel free to join me and feel free to join the conversation. I will see you next week, and take care. Thank you so much to Chris for joining the conversation today.